members are present. Pretty much been here all afternoon, but this is another meeting, or a new meeting from the one that we had this afternoon. So please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, moving on to special recognition. I know we just had a very nice reception for the Reading Roundup Library Awards, but Dr. Ritter, do you have a wrap-up to that?
Yeah, it was wonderful with David Harrison organizing it, and Reading Roundup gave us a check through the foundation for $19,704, and that was distributed amongst librarians who made applications, so congratulations. I see a librarian in the audience there. Are you a librarian? No, I'm sorry. Anyway, I want to congratulate and thank. By the way, David Harrison was the initiator behind expanding and building. Sorry, everybody's looking at me. Anyway, expanding and building the libraries we have in our libraries. And he didn't pick up on that hint, but then eventually he was instrumental in stacking the libraries, if we want to say it that way. Anyway, I want to congratulate him. He and then Rex, can't think of his last name, from KTTS, Hansen, and thank them for all their work as far as what they have done to promote Reading Roundup as well. So anyway, I want to thank you for that.
Okay, great, thank you. And then moving on to our recognition of a State Coach of the Year.
Dr. Harrell?
Good evening. Well, we do have the Missouri High School Association State Coach of the Year for swimming and diving. This recognition also moves Mr. Boyce to the opportunity for the National Federation School Coaches Association for possible recognition at the national level as well. And so this evening we have Dr. Natalie Caldwell, Principal of Glendale High School, and we have Mr. Steve Boyce, the swimming and diving coach, and I'm going to let Dr. Caldwell come up and visit with you for a few minutes.
Good evening. It's my honor tonight to stand before you and be able to introduce Mr. Boyce to you. As you know, I've just now started working with Mr. Boyce, so I don't really have any embarrassing or funny stories to tell about him. Give me another year at Glendale, and I bet I can come up with some. But what I can't... Okay. But what I can tell you are some comments that I've heard from both his swimmers and his parents, and they just say the most wonderful things about Mr. Boyce, about how he motivates their student athletes. The students have a tremendous respect for Mr. Boyce. I've had the opportunity to watch his boys swim this year in one of their events, and just the rapport that he's established with his swimmers. I think if you can see that in action, you can see why he has been the recipient of this award. And so, Mr. Boyce, I know that I don't have all the stats about your program, but I'm going to save that for you. So why don't you come on up and talk to the board about your accomplishments. And we're truly glad to be honored to have such a wonderful, esteemed coach at Glendale High School.
It's funny, the idea of the stats piece of it. As a math guy, I really work hard on what swimmers have to do to improve as far as splits, times, who we got to beat, how they race, what we can do there. I have no idea how many meets we've won, how many meets we've lost. That part of it is not as huge of a concern to me as what we can do to prepare them at the high level at the state championship. And so we were here last spring for winning the state championship with the girls, and that was the first state title in swimming for boys or girls for any Springfield school, and which of course includes Glendale. And that was, I think, the 8th trophy that we brought home to Glendale, and for on the girls swimming side. And so for us to finally win a state title was a pretty exciting thing, and it was a nice thing to be able to share that with Jim Whitelaw, who was with that program for 34 years, and I get to see him every week. He helps out at our swim meets, but to be able to share that with him, bringing all those others home, and then and be a part of what we did. And really, I owe all of that to what the girls do. they work hard every day. We ask them to challenge themselves, and they just raise that level day after day. We'll find out what it's going to look like for this year because I'll meet with them on Thursday, and we may need another pool or three because I'm going to have a whole lot of them show up, and they think winning is fun, but it takes a lot of hard work, so we'll see what happens. Thanks for having me here.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Look at the color of his shoes.
Oh, perfect. Perfect.
Way to go.
Thank you very much. I do need to request that we modify the agenda just slightly under, I have to find out what, under the 9.02, the superintendent search, we will add discussion, first of all, about whether or not to hire a search firm just in general, and there'll be a motion, there'll be a vote on that, and then we'll go into the discussion. If that motion passes, we'll go into the discussion about identifying a certain search firm. So just so you know that we'll have those two motions in that section. Are there any other modifications to the agenda from the board? Okay. Moving on to President's report. It's been a busy month, very busy. A lot of us were involved in, a couple weeks ago, the MSBA annual conference. It's nice to see our board members involved at the state level. And again, Mr. Lee, thank you for your service to that organization. And then to have Mr. Renner recognized again for his service as a past president, and Springfield's been well represented in the officer ranks in that organization. We did do several presentations with staff and board members during the 3-day conference. I think those were all well received, and I think we're able to share our knowledge and expertise with our colleagues from around the state. And then really a nice recognition came that Saturday night as the board was recognized as Outstanding Board of Education in the area of governance. So, teaching, learning, and assessment. We got governance a couple years ago. So I'd just like to thank the board members for your commitment to those very important areas of school operations, and to our staff who really do the work in the trenches. And I think together we make a very good team on behalf of and to support all of our students in our district. So that was nice. Just a heads up that Robertson, our first school that is, now I've heard it use balanced calendar, continuous calendar. There's a lot of different terminology, but they are entering their first intersession in the starting next week, right, Dr. Hackenworth? So if board members wanted the opportunity to go out and see how that particular part of that structure works, I know that Dr. Hackenworth and I are working out a visit, and would love to have other board members come at that time. So that's my report. Any other reports from board members being out into the community or the schools? Yeah,
one thing to remind board members and staff that the 4th annual Springfield Public Schools Hall of Fame luncheon is the 24th next week. We have 2 star alums to recognize, and I think everybody will be proud of them.
And I unfortunately will be out of town that day, so I think there'll be other board members present at that luncheon. So thank you for being there. Dr. Ritter, Superintendent's report.
Right. The 2 people we're recognizing: Elaine Estes, 30 years public librarian in Des Moines, and wonderful lady. She's part of our Rotary. She shows up anyway, and I almost feel like she's a full-time member. And then the other one is John Dickey, and John Dickey is really world-renowned as far as an attorney, and he's a 1945 graduate of Springfield Public Schools. And by the way, Miss Estes is a 1949 graduate. That's the year I was born. Anyway, John Dickey was a Rhodes Scholar, He's had several cases before the Supreme Court, the National Supreme Court, and also had a case in front of the Hague, and lived in London many years. And so really a very prestigious career. So hopefully you can all make that. A couple things that I have. First of all, we did have the internal auditor did sit down with cabinet, and we did a plus delta with the internal auditor. So it was our turn to give him feedback as opposed to him giving us feedback. But either way, it was really a very, very good conversation, and we did do that. I met with all the forums. We had the senior forum, a parent forum, teacher forum, and the student forum, all very well received and well attended. What was interesting about the forums is that basically both the parent and the teacher, as well as my kids first, all were pointing at a need to help parents educate their children. And it was really a very, very strong message led throughout all those forums, and I thought that was interesting. There's still a demand for food, there's still a demand for clothing, but that seemed to be the main thing they were wanting to help on, and that was the piece for parenting. The other thing is that we are rolling out the school-based clinicians, and that was a partnership. That's in partnership with Borough, and so the first day for that, I believe, is October the 24th. Correct me if I'm wrong, and that's going to be a great impact as far as supporting teachers in the classroom and families. Okay, the other thing that is pretty strong as far as coming through the forums, especially Kids First, is the needs for transportation, not just for transportation for students, but also transportation for parents to be able to get to services. And really a recommendation, I thought was a good one, we'll see if we can manage it, is to have the goods brought to the schools so the parents could take them home from there, because they have a hard time getting to the services to be able to pick up their needs or their supplies. The other thing is that the Hillcrest Breakfast in the Classroom, I had a chance to visit Hillcrest today. By the way, I'm very impressed with, and Denise, you need to go back, you won't recognize the atmosphere there. But 600 to 700 students are taking advantage of Breakfast in the Classroom, and 50 staff, and that's an average over every day. And they're seeing an increase and an impact on attendance as well as behavior. And their favorite food, by the way, is cinnamon rolls, warm cinnamon rolls, breadsticks, and then biscuits and gravy. Really good, healthy stuff. But anyway, that is their favorite food, including the staff's favorite food. So
you didn't hear that, Jeff.
So anyway, we will be talking about wellness here shortly. So we've had a great start to the school year. Just always have needs, and I just thought I'd give.
Do we have our attendance numbers from that yet? Do we have the?
We really are not official until tomorrow.
Oh, tomorrow.
Yeah, let's wait. I mean, today. It is today. It's the 15th, but we wait until we hear back from the state,
Okay.
and we'll give you the official numbers.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. Mrs. Litton, are there any public comments? Okay, moving on to our information section and ongoing systems review.
Ms. Palmer? By the way, these reviews are going very well in Cabinet. It does keep us updated, and we're focused on achievement much more through this. So it's a good process. And Joe helps us a lot.
Good evening. Tonight we have 3 programs to review. The format will be the same as last month. A brief overview of the changes from last year, and then we'll flip to the KSM summary, and then that will open up questions from the board. So if I would ask Mrs. Graybill and Mr. Rogers to join me.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to be here this evening to talk just for a few minutes about health and wellness. Also want to say a very special thank you for approving the budget to increase the FTE for school nurses. The first time in the history of Springfield Public Schools we have a full-time nurse in every single school building. So thank you so much for that. That will definitely impact the lives of children. We have a number of things that are improvements that we want to share with you. Just a couple of them, though. Student injuries occurring at school decreased significantly, and we think that is related to increased education both for our staff as far as orienting them to the proper use of playground equipment and orientation to students as to age-appropriate equipment that they need to be using on the playground. So that decreased significantly as far as our injuries go. Opportunities for improvement, still improving access to healthy food, so we need to be working on that, and we've joined with a number of community groups to address those issues. So not only looking at breakfast in the classroom, but we're looking at it from a community perspective as well, as Dr. Ritter mentioned. So Jeff, why don't you talk about increased participation in HRAs?
One of the key strengths that we identified through the wellness department, and to put it in context, in 2007 when the board approved the starting or the formation of the wellness department, we had 237 employees participate in the health risk assessments. Last year we saw that number reach 1,619. And so we wanted to go ahead and highlight that as an area of improvement, but also an area that we are showing in the red. If you look at your summary, that's an area that we want to improve on, and the ultimate goal is to have all of our employees participating in health risk assessments.
So any questions from the board?
Do they get any sort of incentive for participating in the health risk assessment?
I think one of the neat things we were able to implement was the fitness center reimbursement program. And what we did, I think we're over 65 approved facilities that an employee can access. And we originally used the term fitness center. We have yoga, Pilates, but we tied that into you have to participate in the health risk assessment first. And I think our numbers are right under 500 employees that are participating in that.
I know that there are some employers that are even going to the extent of giving employees a discounted rate on insurance or some sort of incentive through premiums. And I know because we pay that fully, that may not be the incentive, but maybe even saying, if you don't participate, we're going to add, a certain number of dollars.
Yeah, and we're having discussions right now, and have been ongoing to look at programs like that. I know Missouri State, we're kind of modeling and looking at that to see if that's a possibility for us.
Do you monitor the usage of the facilities? I mean, do you keep track of, because I know to some companies, they're keeping track of how much you go to the fitness center or Pilates and banking the discounts based on not just paying the dues for it, or the entry, whatever you call it. I can't think what senior moment here, but actually usage of the facility and then discounting or whatever you do, the incentive for that. I've seen some companies
the reimbursement is actually tied into your attendance.
Okay, so
if you attend 12 times in a 30-day cycle, it's 100% of the membership fee. And if you attend at least 8, it's 50%. And so it's up to the employees to track that and turn it into MedPay.
Have we, on the HRAs, the health risk assessments, have we surveyed on that as to why people aren't completing those?
I don't know that we've done survey questions per se as far as why. Our numbers, I think a lot of it is awareness, and so we're out in the buildings encouraging it through the nurses, the importance of why we want staff to participate in it.
It may be interesting to see why, with a quick survey monkey or something to say, have you done it? If you haven't done it, what's the reason to inconvenience?
Yeah, I think we've addressed from a convenience standpoint. Mercy comes to our sites. And they work around our early hours and things. So that might be something we can look into doing for sure.
It just seems like there maybe is a plateau here, and without understanding the reason behind it. Also had a question. We have the listing of the percent of obese students, which is always shocking to me. Is that something that you intentionally, other than reporting on it, that we intentionally work on?
Yes, and I get a number of requests from community agencies all of the time to ask us what our obesity rates are. And in fact, Dr. Prater and I have been on a committee on Every Child's Promise that's looking at health and nutrition, especially in the early childhood, birth through age 6. And so we're looking at that data specifically. And so how can we impact the nutritional status of children? So we're looking at a broader picture and what can we do from the community perspective to make sure that children have access to healthy food within the district. Of course, adding the breakfast in the classroom so that they have access to food. And nutrition services and health services have been working very closely together to look at what types of food are we serving. So they may serve a cinnamon roll, but it is reduced fat, and we are looking at changing the standards, because you were on that committee, remember, on the wellness committee when we looked at the guidelines, and so we're going to be looking at that this year in changing the standards of what we are serving within the school day. And then what can we do to improve the school gardens, community gardens, and how can we bring fresh produce to children who need it?
Yeah, and I guess that kind of leads into the question whether or not we've done all we can do in terms of food, whether breakfast and lunch is as healthy as we can make it, or do we need to squeeze that more? Because my daughter, who's a 6th grader, likes to have breakfast in the classroom, and
Right.
part of me thinks that the reason she likes it so much is
because of what's being served.
Because of
and
what's being served, but
right, and we are working very closely on changing those standards. So I think you're going to see this year some changes in what types of foods that are being served. I think we're really moving in that direction, and also looking and talking with principals about the birthday policy and looking at every day. They're celebrating birthdays, but we've become the mecca for birthday party celebrations, and is that really necessary for us to do that? Can we do that in a non-food way to highlight children's big day as a birthday? So we're working on different strategies with that.
Mrs. Bush? I'm just astounded, about the number of students with chronic health conditions.
Yes, and that continues to intensify. As I've been here in 23 years, it's the intensity of the needs of students with chronic health conditions has risen. Numbers of students with allergies continues to increase. Numbers of kids with asthma, numbers of kids with diabetes, both type 1 and type 2. So lots of needs, which is why it's important to have a health professional on site to work with them.
What percentage have health insurance?
Well, we have 40% of our kids that are on Medicaid. We have 60% of our kids on free and reduced lunch. So there is still a significant population that are not insured. And I've just been reviewing all of that as we're doing our flu vaccination clinics, because we ask parents, do you have Medicaid, do you have insurance, or are you not insured? And we're going to implement some strategies to work with those parents who identified that they didn't have insurance to see if we can't get them connected with Medicaid or MoHealthNet.
Dr. Prater, did you have a question?
I was just going to commend Jean, because she's out there in the community. We're looking at a whole list of community problems here. And you can say, well, we deal with what we get. And school nurses are only the tip of the iceberg, and she and a lot of other people are working community-wide to look at that obesity rate. And, in the past it was students are starving, feed them. And now we have to relook at that and say, are we feeding them the right way? Is it better to feed them even if we know it's not healthy? At least they're getting some calories. So I wish it was a simple, a simple issue, but it's phenomenally complex. And I think you and your staff are to be commended for what you're doing.
Mr. Renner?
In looking at some of the numbers, when I saw them, they're just staggering to me, and I'm glad finally we've got nurses in schools, because with 300,000 visits to health rooms, and we didn't have a nurse there, so who was taking care of, or dispensing 60,000 different kinds of medication, and you weren't really sure you ought to be dispensing medication based on we didn't have a class on dispensing medication in education, I don't think. So I'm glad we've taken that step, but these numbers still are staggering numbers, but at least we have somebody who's in the building to deal with some of those, who's trained to deal with them, rather than people who just don't know exactly what to do. So,
Mr. Lee?
Just a quick question. Do we offer the HRAs for retirees? Do they have access to it? Okay.
Any other questions about this?
If they're on the health.
If they're on the health plan. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Our next program this evening is Student Records, and Mrs. Ann White, please join me.
Well, it's an honor to be here, and thank you for all the support you provide our department. Jill will be handing out one of the items that was our area of strength was newsletter, and I was going to increase that to 12 or 9 issues for this coming year, and we're well on the way to meeting that goal. Our newsletters provide information and updates to building secretaries and principals that deal with student record issues, enrollment issues, and other kinds of information they need to do their job to address student record keeping. One of our key strengths from last year was reducing the amount of paper that we used with student records, and that we retired 2 pretty large pieces of paper that was costly for us and time-consuming for secretaries. That was the student assessment record and the student information card that's in the newsletter that's highlighted there for you. Opportunities for improvements for us is archiving these newsletters, because we do have new staff hired in buildings that are unsure about all the processes and policies, and so we archive those in iShares, and I look back and review those newsletters to bring forward in a different way information that's timely and pertinent by quarter. Another important part of our processes for improving for this year is to provide online paperless delivery of transfer request forms as well as transitional request forms. And there was quite a big budget saver for our building sites. When you looked at those NCR triplicate forms, they were about $1 a piece per child in a request. So that's gone. And the challenge to continue to be less paper driven is right in front of us. We are going to be working on paperless delivery of the affidavits that we present to parents that come to the records office for educational affidavits, independent student affidavits, and homeless affidavits. And then there's a variety of those in between, but those are the 3 major categories. So we are working now on an official stamp using my Brenda Swearingen, and the ladies in the records office are awesome, and she has worked with IT to get that stamp official, so that now we can just deliver that via either email or fax scan to the buildings, an official copy, and that will save a lot of paper and double duty on services. So again, we're challenged to review more of our paperless delivery methods and are doing some comparable studies with districts that are large like us. However, one of the drawbacks on that is some of the smaller districts are not able to deliver technology-delivered paperless products for us, so we may still be dealing with their paper products, but here, once it's in-house, we're looking at methods to make that more streamlined. And our final area of opportunity was to improve was to get stakeholder feedback. We've been weak in that area, and so at the end of the spring last year, we developed a secretary survey to ask them for input about what our processes were and how we could support them in a better opportunity. And we got information from them that helped us proceed to retire the student information card this year and other methods to help us streamline their work. Any questions?
Any questions? I'll just say, as someone who filled out a lot of those student information cards and assessment reports over the years, thank you. Thank you so much. Anything else?
Well, as someone who is
Still doing it.
still filling out 3 forms in triplicate every year for every one of these forms, we cannot go paperless fast enough, and we cannot have a database that you can check and say, yep, everything's the same, doctor's the same, because it is a hassle.
Anything else?
Yeah, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Ann for something else. Ann is really the person who receives all complaints. And I'm even, it's just amazing what she does. And I encourage you to sit down and just listen to her once. I mean, everybody's going to melt. I mean, you will melt right in front of her because she just makes you feel so good
About your complaint?
about the fact, about your complaint. But she puts it back in your lap like you wouldn't believe. And so she just really, really does an awesome job. And we, in operations, as well as at the sites, really appreciate what you do there. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Our final program tonight is Attendance Services with Dr. Matt Hudson.
Good evening. Excuse me. Thank you for letting me be here tonight to talk about our district attendance and where we are and where we're headed. First of all, I want to introduce the staff that helps really do all of these visits in the field, and we have them all here except for one who's absent, so we're not setting a very good record for ourselves. But anyway, he didn't bring a note from home yet. But here with the staff from Attendance Services includes Marty Montgomery. She's from the Parkview Attendance area. Ed Doris from the Central Attendance area. Marcia Ray from the Glendale Attendance area. And Chrissy Ritchie from the Hillcrest Attendance area. So I want to thank them for all their hard work. They drive several thousand miles a month in this district to knock on doors and go into some sometimes uncomfortable situations and meet with students and parents to get them to school. So we really appreciate what you all do. First of all, one of our key strengths is we appreciate very much your support last year in increasing for this year the mileage budget. With the cost of gas actually kind of leveling now, but had increased quite a bit, we did not have the adequate funds to pay for the advisors' mileage, and the number of miles that they're traveling each month has increased quite a bit over the last several years because of the needs of our students, from what Ms. Graybill explained earlier, with just different types of things that our community is facing. So we do appreciate that. We have a couple of things we'd like to work on this year for our opportunities for improvement. The first is, as you may know and recall from the MSIP 5 documents that are now in place, 90% of our students are required to be at 90% attendance or better. That's a state benchmark, and that was approved last summer. And we receive MSIP points from that. 10 MSIP points for our district come from the 90% or higher mark. So we started measuring that last year just to see where we were, and now we are actually officially being measured for that, and so that's something that we will work on as a department. In addition, the attendance advisors are looking at a targeted intervention, which will allow them to really focus on that middle group of students who typically fly under the radar, and they cause your attendance to go down, but they're not someone that the teacher or the principal or secretary may realize is causing attendance to really decline. We tend to focus a lot on the lower end and leave the upper end alone. We're going to really shift our focus and try to work on that group of 70 to 85%, which is the bulk of our population in the attendance as far as Springfield goes. Just a lot of kids in that middle group that need to be kind of given the extra push. And then finally, we also are increasing our attendance benchmarks or levels for the high school. We previously had a lower list there. The ranges were lower than the elementary and middle levels, and that really didn't send a very clear message about why we should allow high school kids to miss more. We're not encouraging that, but the way our metrics were listed there, it was like we were saying it was okay to miss more at the high school level. So we have some work in front of us, but we're very excited, and I have a very qualified group to do that with. So I appreciate your support, and if you have any questions.
I've had some limited input from the public about maybe some glitches in the software, the attendance records, or if it's software or the various people creating the attendance information, that what their child and their child's friends had gotten in terms of attendance was not what they felt it was. Is there a glitch there, or somewhere there are too many hands inputting that, or what might be the problem?
Well, one of the things that I know that our IT department works with very well, and I communicate with them on a weekly, if not daily basis in some cases, is the IT department oversees and makes sure that the data that's being submitted, there's integrity behind that. But there's some training issues, which is one of the things that we've identified as a kind of something we want to fix quickly, because we do have a turnover in staff that training really needs to be addressed and being consistent across all levels and divisions. But I don't believe it's a widespread problem, and I do know that we are looking at the types of things that folks might be talking about to make sure that the data is good.
Yeah, I think one of the issues that compounded it was she was a debate group, and was an excused absence, not an excused absence. So understand the complexities, but something like that may be hurting the numbers when they shouldn't be.
And that's very true. And that training component and just being consistent with the way is one of our goals, is to get that. That's something we've quickly identified as a need.
Good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah. Sure.
With respect to high school attendance, is the data, and I'm guessing data just based on history with my kids, attendance declining from freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors as they get older? Is that what's driving the juniors, seniors, the older kids that aren't coming, or is it just pretty much across the board? Which I mean, I don't know what to do about that one.
You would actually think that's the case, and in some schools it is, but it's not universal. Okay. You might go from having a freshman class with a lower attendance record to going to their sophomore with a higher, and then it falling back down. Typically, what you suggested is correct, but that's not always the case. And if you look at last year's data, that's not the case in 2 of our schools. And so that's the kind of pinpointing we're trying to doing with the targeted interventions, is because it's not something that's just a trend you can kind of put a fix on. It's something that we kind of have to move with it, and that's what we're trying to do, because it's not something that's just black and white, here it is. It's something we have to kind of move with. In fact, we were speaking, Dr. Ritter and I were earlier with our attendance group, and attendance is down this year at the beginning of the school year. We are at 42 days. The quarter ended today, and students are out tomorrow. And we talked about, with the attendance advisors, what those different issues are and try to identify what we have control over, and then just trying to educate and get folks here when they can be, when they're healthy and things of that nature.
This is a financial issue, but if you talk about, does each attendance advisor drive 2,000 miles?
No.
That's total.
That's total for the month.
Oh,
yeah, that's a lot of miles.
Let's get some district vehicles here.
No, the average mileage driven is between 300 and 500 per month,
Okay.
and that is something that we are looking at trying to reduce because of our focus again. But we really, even if we hadn't done that, some of the issues had to do with just the general increase of the IRS mileage rate, which hadn't been addressed in some time. So we do appreciate that support.
I think it's important too. You think if you want kids in school, it's also a financial issue. I mean, 1% attendance is
Big
lots of
difference for
dollars.
us. Yep.
That's
Half
correct.
$1,000,000 or $1 million, something like that, dollars. Just raising attendance up 1% is significant.
I was just
dollars.
thinking there might be some value. I mean, I know we have district vehicles for some things.
No,
didn't
and
know.
I want the kids there, but it's also financial
Anything
impact to
else?
the district.
That's what we need.
Anything else on this? Okay, thank you, and thank
Thank
you
you.
to all of you for being in the trenches every day.
You know, they really enjoy it, by the way. They do a good job.
To take a minute about feedback about the process this year, any feedback or modifications?
I like the fewer per time that we're reviewing. 3 versus 7's good.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, fewer is a lot better than
I think it's going well. I think everybody's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to bond projects. Mr. Wendt.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Ritter. It's my pleasure to present the 2013 bond project update for you. You received the
attachment for the 2013 bond report, which included the 2013 financials. There were also 2 separate attachments for the 2009 June 30 end of year after the accruals finished or were completed, and then the 2009 through the end of September. As we look at the 2013 bond projects, there's 5 construction projects that make that up, and the first thing I need to do is actually have my disclaimer. What you are about to see may or may not happen. This is actually conceptual. This is design process at this time, so there's still a lot of work to take place, so I had to do that. The first project would be Hickory Hills. Hickory Hills is the project where we are looking at a 4-classroom addition. But as we look at our projects and as we think about our 21st century learning and those things, we've started looking at that as how we could incorporate collaborative space within that area. This is one concept. And the other thing we look at as we look at our designs is how we would continue to add on if we needed to. With that concept, this would be a potential addition that could take place in the future if needed. Here's a different concept, again incorporating some potential collaborative space as budget allows. How that addition would add on to that as well. This, when we built the original Hickory Hills, we had already planned on how we would add on to the building. So what you're seeing with that addition is basically up in this, the addition up in this area here. So this is currently a storage area in the building, and that was always meant to be opened up to make that connection through for that project. Here you can get an idea of what that would look like from an overall site view with that type of addition. Again, we haven't completely settled on that at this point in time. As we look at the Fremont project, I wanted to show a few slides. This is where we had both staff and architects interacting with parents and getting feedback. They had a pizza night at Fremont to draw out the crowds and get the input. They talked with the parents about what they liked in the existing building, what they didn't like in the existing building, and what they would hope to see in a future project. We also, the architect had put some basic plan together of the existing building and gave out to the grade levels, and this was one of the sketches that from a second grade classroom as they added classrooms on across the back, want a bigger player area, bigger parking lot. I'm not sure who's driving in second grade, but that is interesting. But it's always great to see what's important at all the different grade levels. Again, this is conceptual. This is one of the thoughts. In this particular scheme, the existing building is right through this area here. And so some of the existing building would potentially be demolished and then addition onto it. This is obviously the open courtyard area in the front. As they thought about that, they thought, well, we maybe need to close that in for circulation. Gives better circulation, maybe put the library up into that center area. So still a lot of thought process there. You can see in the lower right-hand corner where it shows some fourth grade classrooms. That would be the existing all-purpose room and one of the potential uses of that space for that. Here's a little different type of concept that they're also exploring where you actually see the grade sections in their own pods. The library in the center section. So a lot of fun and exciting work going on with that group and continuing on with this project as well. As we look at our Glendale High School, Glendale was one where we're really focusing.
Could you tell us which architects as you go through?
Oh, sure. Hickory Hills was with Paragon. Fremont is with Bates and Associates. And Glendale is with Gaskin Hill Norcross. And as you see here, I just kind of put a little rectangle in here to show you basically where the courtyard is that we're basically planning on closing in. And the main concept for this project was to enclose the courtyard, be able to improve the kitchen serving area, expand that cafeteria, and make improvements to the library. And so what the architects have done in this concept basically picks up on, you can see the curve coming through from that main entrance that they picked it up. I would like to point out there's definitely some elevation differences. If you look through this line here, this is higher than this area down below. So that's why you'll see ramps and some stairs in there, and they try to work that in. One of the things that, as we look at this and also at Kickapoo, is talking about some of that collaborative workspace, and we're still fine-tuning and trying to work through, but there's the potential of using, an area here. You have a small potential project area. During a non-meal time, you could have a teaching surface in here. So there's a lot of different things that are being looked at this time with this particular project. Here's kind of a computer rendering. This would be from the front entrance looking through to the kitchen area. This is from the kitchen looking back through to the front entrance. So here you can get a better idea of those elevation differences and how that plays into the design.
Scott, how does the whole new tech concept fit in with this, if at all, with the design?
This is not part of that new tech piece. Dr. Harrell, if you wanted to.
It is. It's going to be a collaborative instructional space as well. So we're going to try to incorporate areas within those larger spaces, the commons area and the library, to where you can have large and small group instruction occurring. So by really in floor patterns and seeing it very simple ways to get natural breaks to where you'll know this is an area where you could have a group of 30, or this area you might have a group of 60. So that's the incorporated component. You're not talking
I wasn't talking about those classrooms before. But one of the challenges in the Glendale design versus the Kickapoo is this is a longer, narrower area, and then with those elevation changes does create some additional challenge in doing that. As we look at Sherwood, Sherwood is with SAP Design and Associates. There's a picture of Jim Stufflebeam with SAP, and this was working with a parent group. And one of the activities they did with the parents was actually kind of a puzzle diagram, if you will, looking at programming space and the relationship on how it all works together. So the parents kind of worked with what was important and with teachers as well to see how they would coordinate different areas in their relationship. As we look at the Sherwood site, this is not the actual floor footprint for the building, but it's just an idea of what a 60,000 square foot building would look like on this site. And what this has basically brought our group to realize in trying to keep as much site open is we'll probably look at in the upper grade levels, a second floor for just the upper grade levels. We have considerable parking and then the play areas to preserve here on the site. One of the several different concepts that they've looked at where they've bumped classrooms out, creating a wider corridor area for some collaborative space, some learning parks, as you will. Also some project labs in there. All some of the things that we're looking at and weighing in how many grade level or how many classrooms per grade level or per section, and trying to get the most that we can within our budget. Here's another concept for seeing how it all lays out. One of the things that we are also working on at this time is continuing to evaluate the Boys and Girls Club partnership, and we're hopeful that will materialize for us. One of the things that I had hoped that I could bring to you this evening was related to the net zero study. As we looked at this, I just received the information and have not had an opportunity to go through and truly evaluate it, so more information will be coming forward related to that. Kickapoo, I saved this.
Before you go on, what kind of shared, what part of the facility would be shared with Boys and Girls Club? And Is there room there to add on
There is.
enough space?
Yes, basically, and it isn't finalized at this point, but what's being discussed is roughly a 5,000 square foot facility, which we would adjoin to the gymnasium. What's being proposed at this point is that it would be something that they would pay for, so it would not impact our budget. But we believe that we can work that in within the space that we have, and it fits well with the programming. As we look at Kickapoo, this is Buxton Cubic Dodd, are the architects for the Kickapoo project. I saved Kickapoo for last because this is probably the most complex project of the projects we have. Here's a picture of one of the student representative meetings, meeting with the architect and going through and getting feedback as they looked at it. But the Kickapoo project is basically made up of 3 components. And as we look at it, this is just to show you a lot of different ways we've looked at things. I'll blow one up here just so you can see it a little closer. But the main components to this project consist of the auditorium, which in this case they're showing a new auditorium. The current auditorium is here. The other is enclosing the courtyard to increase how that cafeteria, serving area, and all that area works. And the third component is the mechanical system. So let me talk a little bit more. Let me first talk about the auditorium component. One of the things, because of where the auditorium is currently located within the facility, as we looked at renovating that and trying to increase seating with it, there was only a couple of real options to look at. So one of the things the architects and engineers evaluated was, is it more feasible to try to do that because of how it impacts the space next to it versus just building new. And as they've gone through that evaluation, they're tending to, at this point, we believe it's more feasible to build a new auditorium than trying to actually move some of the walls within the existing auditorium. So that's one of the things that's being reviewed at this point in time. The second area is in that kitchen serving area and enclosing the courtyard. Again, this would represent basically where the courtyard currently sits. But in this scheme, what you see is the open space, and as Dr. Harrell was talking about a minute ago, what we're looking at is how some of these open areas could be used for collaborative learning. And here are some renderings from the architects to see where you could have, using some FF&E to break up how you'd have some individual areas that could be utilized. Because of the large open volume space, it gives you opportunity to do some larger things as well. This is actually a view from the east, looking back towards the current main entrance. How opening up the old serving area to work for our current programs. And here you could see even underneath the stairwell, actually having an area where students could work on things. You notice even on the columns they've looked at possibly putting some type of whiteboard or some things where kids would have the opportunity to work on different types of projects. And this is actually looking towards the back of the building, and you can see how to bring in all the daylighting to help brighten up the area. So they've done a nice job with this. The other thing I wanted to mention related to this project is FEMA. We had applied for a grant for FEMA for the Kickapoo project, and the way the grants work with FEMA has to do with your student and staff population, and then also the density of the community around it. By utilizing Kickapoo, we would be able to maximize and get the largest grant for any of our sites. So what we're attempting to do at this point is to get a grant for Kickapoo, which we've been told that we're in really good shape for. And then what we would do is basically supplant some of the funds from Kickapoo to Fremont and Sherwood and be able to actually build 3 safe rooms only the one at Kickapoo would be an official FEMA licensed one, if you will, but the other sites we could actually build a safe room to the actual FEMA standards. We just wouldn't have to go through the red tape. So that's part of the process. But the challenge that brings is, first of all, it's 2 to 6 months before we would officially hear. That's once the government opens back up. But we're on the, we still have some time to work through that. So as far as the actual Kickapoo piece, we're okay. Where it creates a challenge is with the Fremont and the Sherwood projects, because we need to get those designs, we need to get those out on the street. So what we're doing is I've asked the architects to actually build or design the gymnasiums base bid just as a hardened shell, but as an alternate for design to the FEMA standards. So that way, when we do officially hear one way or the other from FEMA, we'll have that opportunity to take the alternate or not. We do have some opportunity to protect the alternate for a period of time within the bid as well. I've heard of alternates where in a contract, when they've awarded a contract, they've given the owners the right to accept an alternate as long as up to 6 months pass. We have to be careful with the timing of that, but that's how we're looking at potentially addressing that issue. I need to also mention there was a symposium recently that the Chamber, MSU, and the Springfield Contractors Association put on, just talking about the volume of work that's going to be taking place over the next 13 to 18 months, $417 million worth of work, pretty staggering amount. 313 of that being in public projects. The other thing as I look at here is 76% of that is actual building projects, because there are other different types of specialty projects and things. So as we look at that, the important things looking at $32 million worth of projects over the next 13 months, each month, 10 projects per month. And from a contractor standpoint, they really try to bid Tuesday, Wednesdays, Thursdays. They avoid the Mondays and the Fridays. So then you really start narrowing down the potential of projects bidding against each other and being on top of each other. And that's what we really have to be careful and watch. 81% of those publicly funded, so they will happen because those are projects that they actually do have the money. This is the part that is probably the most concerning to me. 50% of that is scheduled in the first 4 months of 2014. So really heavy on the first quarter, and that's where we're going to be. We'll talk about that. I'll show you what I'm looking at as far as our schedule coming up here. So they're really talking about planning that work carefully, working, collaborating with the owners and the architects to just make sure you keep on track. The SCA's put a new bid calendar. They've updated their bid calendar to try to help. They're trying to get more contractors at the subcontractor level to do bonding. This is the one that was kind of interesting to me, make your projects more appealing. But what that really refers to is contractors are going to be shopping their work because of the volume of it. So what you're looking at is a contractor is going to say, have I had a good relationship with this architect, or have I been burned in the past? I'm going to avoid projects they've designed. Has this owner paid me well? Have I been stuck with issues? I'm going to avoid those. So it's that type of thing, having a good working relationship. And the other thing is having clean prints when you put them out on the street. The problem that the contractors have, they might get the prints. We typically have our plans out on the street for 30 days. Well, they get them that early and they start working through them. The last thing they want is the architect to put a big addendum out 1 week before the bid's due, and they have to redo all the work they've done on the front end. So that's all about making those projects appealing. So it's important, and that's why we harp so much on quality control in the work. So as we look at our projects, here's basically what we're looking at. Fremont, that'll be a spring project. I'm not putting a specific date at this point, because what will happen is as our projects get closer, as the plans get refined and we get those bid documents ready to go, Then we'll be looking closely at the calendar. MSU has a lot of work. I'll be talking a lot with Doug Sampson there and coordinating so we're not bidding against each other. And that one we're looking at for a completion in fall of 15. Glendale, again, the reason why Glendale is important to get out in spring is when you're enclosing that courtyard, we have to be real careful. There's only some work that can be done during summer when there's no students in there. So it's really important that for the start of this summer that we hit the ground running. So it's critical we get those projects out. Hickory Hills, we're hopeful we might squeeze that one out, maybe even in front of these other projects, hopefully, and have that ready in the fall of 14. One of the things we might do on that project to help control the budget as well, one of the things that affects your bid price is time. So in this particular project, what we might do is look at bidding at both time and money as a factor and see what type of schedules the contractors are more comfortable with can help keep your price down. So that's one of the things we'll be looking at with that Hickory Hills project. Kickapoo, as I mentioned, was more complex. So you have phase 1A, which is the mechanical. We need to get that started because that's a long project to complete all the mechanical work. Phase 1B is the cafeteria kitchen area. So again, enclosing that courtyard, a real critical thing to hit this summer, coming summer, running as soon as that hits. And have that to where at the end of summer we can still utilize those space. Wouldn't be 100% complete, but we've got to have temporary occupancy, and obviously we need to have a kitchen and be able to serve our students. Phase 2 would be that auditorium component, and this is where with that FEMA tie-in, there's two pieces. On the front end, not knowing for 2 to 6 months if we get approved with FEMA, but then if we are approved with FEMA, then FEMA actually has to review your plans, and then there's another time delay in there. So that's where pushing off that phase 2 works well with the Kickapoo, and to where we would try to get it out at the end of summer or maybe even fall of 14. And then Sherwood, again, if we were targeting to open a new school in the for the 15-16 school year, we'd want to make sure we get Sherwood out in spring as well. So a lot going on. It's all really tight together, and we're going to be working closely with everyone to protect our bid pricing and not bid against ourselves. Just to mention the information technology, you'll notice in the report that they have the link to the website, and on the website they've got the information for you to look at to see the timelines and where they're doing on that at this point. And with that, I will.
It's a lot.
Question. I apologize for racing through, but there's a lot of information.
Quick question.
Yes.
This is kind of clarifying what Mrs. Bush asked about Sherwood. And I noticed that in your bond projects, you did mention that the buildable land area of the project is limited. So is that statement before adding the Boys-Girls Club addition or after adding that?
Well, 5,000 square feet is not. I would just say in general, because of the lay of the land and everything we're trying to do, one of the challenges we have there is with parking. You're not in a normal subdivision area. There's no good place to park and walk onto the site, so we need to actually have more parking on our area as well. So it's hard to answer that question specifically, but I don't think that 5,000 square feet has that big of an impact on that overall site.
Okay, so that won't short us in terms of doing what we need to do for the school. Okay. And then the second one is I noticed that on a couple of places you mentioned some project challenges. I appreciate you putting those in there. And that was the connection to existing steps or ramps. And I think you had that listed for Fremont, Hickory Hills, and I think you maybe mentioned it for Kickapoo or Glendale. So when you say project challenges, is there an expectation that it might cost more money to do that or cause increase the time?
It's just something that it's something else you have to deal with that you might not normally be working with, and you just want to make sure that you work it out the best way within the project. And there's different solutions to each one of those challenges, but we just try to highlight some of the things we're working through on the project. That's what we're referring to with the challenges.
Dr. Prater?
Can you ballpark an estimate of a hard shell versus the increased cost for a FEMA safe room? Is that a big add-on if we need it?
Well, we believe, I guess the best way I can answer that at this point, I can't give you a specific per site, but we believe that with what the maximum grant we could receive for Kickapoo would be between $3.4 to $3.8 million. We believe that it would probably only take, for once we would build an auditorium, it would probably only take about $1 million of that to actually make that into a safe room. So that's how we could supplant some of those other funds to shift it over. So roughly $1 million, I would say, at those sites to take, whether it's a gym or an auditorium to
I gather you're not as optimistic about the bidding climate, and to try to do those anyway or no matter what might be a reach.
Well, there's just so much going on right now. Pre-stressed concrete is the material of choice when you are building those safe rooms, and they're real busy. We have one here locally in town. They're the ones that did Hickory Hills. They do great work. They've done our other FEMA shelters here, or safe rooms, excuse me, in town. There is competition out there, though, but they are really busy, so there's lead times. You have to work with it. And that's one of the other challenges, even with the courtyards at the high schools, just structural steel. There's about a 12-week lead time. So once you get those designs awarded to a contractor, they've got to get those shop drawings back in, get that approved, get it out to the manufacturer. I mean, it's a big domino. It's a big chess game, actually, as you're working through it.
Mr. Renner?
I think one point you made to me, which should have been obvious but wasn't, that we're maybe not, I mean, contractors aren't saying, oh, great, the school system's doing something. I mean, Sherwood would be fine because it's a brand new building. But when they have to work around students and have a short period of time, they'd say, gosh, why wouldn't I build this new building out here that I don't have to work around? And we're saying you can't get in there to May 15th, and by August 15th you've got to be gone. You know, I can see where they'd say, I don't, you know. So I think for us to face some of the realities there is going to be kind of tough, because most of ours aren't, the things we're doing first aren't brand new things that they can just do at any point in time. So
I think we do have a good relationship with most contractors, and so I do think they do like to work with us. But you're right, the work itself, there's messy work and there's clean work, and so they'll weigh that in. Hopefully, I think we'll see more of that maybe with the subcontractors than the general contractors. So hopefully they'll tie in with their with the general they really like. It'll be interesting.
Bush?
Is there any chance or any reason why we might want to put off some of these projects till after the big rush is over?
Well, I think there's always a risk that, you know, the longer you wait, just time can increase prices too. I think I would just recommend we move forward at this point. We look at the projects that are happening. We bid it. If the bids come in significantly higher, we have in the past rebid projects and seen our prices come down. And I think we just evaluate as we go.
Okay, Mr. Hosmer?
Scott, is cost the only reason we're not building a FEMA or a safe room in our buildings now?
Yes.
I don't know. I guess I'm a little concerned as a board member, having been in Joplin 2 weeks after those tornadoes hit, and
Bear Grove,
and seeing that devastation. And I understand FEMA. It's great to get that money, and
I think that's why we're looking at some hardened areas that's not designed to take an EF5, but is better than your typical construction. That's what we've kind of looked at the base, because that's within our budgetary.
But you look at projections from climate scientists. They're going to tell us that weather is going to get more unpredictable. Tornado seasons are going to be stronger. Those are the data that's out there, and we're a data-driven district. And for one, I'd like us to bite the bullet and do it, and hopefully we get FEMA funds. But if we don't, we do it and we figure out how to pay for it.
Well, I think the board will have that option with how we're looking at bidding it, because we'll be building that as the alternate, so that'll come forward as the bid, and the board will have that opportunity.
Any more questions? It's been a complete report. Thank you, Scott, for keeping us up to date. Okay, moving on to 7.03, update on the Burleson lawsuit. Dr. Ritter.
So I've asked Mr. Ellis to join us this evening to have a conversation with the board, just to share where that's all at as far as the lawsuit, and ready to kind of be very open as far as cost, and also where we can go from here as far as use of drug dogs.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm low tech.
You're it, right?
At myself. And
that's all right.
It. This case is at the end, nearly. We have just a few loose ends to deal with. If you recall, it was filed back in 2010. It took approximately 3 years to process. It was filed at the district court level. The allegation in the complaint was that the use of drug detection dogs in the high schools, and specifically at Central High School in April of 2010, was a violation of the Fourth Amendment protections on search and seizure. The district court reviewed that and found, and in 2012, found that the district had not violated the search and seizure provisions of the Fourth Amendment. That was appealed. Only a portion of that was appealed by the Burlesons to the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals, and the only portion that they appealed was a seizure. It was a seizure issue, which is different from the search issue. There's two different constitutional issues there. They did not appeal the search issue, so it ended with the district court judgment, and we argued the seizure issue in January of this year and had an opinion in March, I believe. Maybe it was a little later than that, but the Eighth Circuit's only problem, it was a unanimous opinion, their only problem was whether or not it constituted a seizure or didn't constitute a seizure. You can have if you have a seizure, and we were talking about the property, separating the young man from his book bag, whether that constituted an unlawful seizure. You can have a seizure of persons too, but that was not in this case. And the Eighth Circuit, one of the three panel members would find that there wasn't even a seizure, which is the most conservative, and frankly, by my reading of the current law on seizures in the Eighth Circuit, is probably the correct finding in this case. But the other two panel members found, and it really didn't matter, they found that yes, there was a seizure, but the seizure was reasonable. So thinking that it was over at that point, the Burlesons, never to be deterred, sent the matter up on a petition for writ of certiorari to the Supreme Court. And that went in June and was decided on the first Monday, October 7th, and the court denied their petition for certiorari. So we are at the end. The only question remaining are some loose ends, like I said, and there are no further appeals on this case. So the questions that you have to look at are, we currently have two judgments against the plaintiffs for approximately $800 in costs. You can get those fairly easy. So we have two judgments at this point, one for the cost at the district court level and one for the cost at the Eighth Circuit. We're probably going to submit a request for costs at the Supreme Court, but they're very hard to get. And that would be an additional $1,000, $1,100 for the brief that we had at the Supreme Court. You have to publish your brief, so it has to be printed. So we had to print a brief, and it costs $1,100 to do that. So that's the first question. Loose end is, I think we probably can get agreement from them that they'll pay that, but if not, you have to levy on those judgments through the normal processes. The second issue is attorney's fees in the case, and I was asked to bring an accurate amount. The attorney's fees through 30 September of this year were $97,084.45. Now,
Say that again. How much?
$97,084.45. I bet that's as close as I can get.
Sounds pretty close.
So that we are all on the same page, the district has liability insurance carrier. There's a $50,000 retention on that liability insurance. So the first $50,000 is out of pocket to the district and has long been paid. The remaining, everything after $50,000 is paid for by the insurance carrier. And so they have approximately $47,000 in cost as well. So like we all know, if you have an insurance, I mean, the ramifications of having a claim for $47,000 are if you get sued or you have a claim for any kind of insurance claim on liability, it's likely it's going to count on your insurance for the next renewal on that. But, I mean, we don't know that to be the case, but that's why you carry insurance. So
Did the Burlesons pay that out of their pocket, or did someone or some organization pay that on their behalf?
I do not know.
Okay.
But I understand that the Rutherford Foundation has been behind this, and I don't know to what extent they paid or what kind of agreement they have. Those things aren't privy to us. I will say to you, though, that when you mull on the issue of whether or not you recover or you want to seek recovery for attorney's fees, you cannot get recovery from a non-party to the case. So it would be solely on the basis of going against the plaintiffs if you were to do that.
But the $97,000 is monies we paid to defend this lawsuit, not monies the Burlesons paid. This is $97,000.
The $97,000 is your cost to us.
Yeah.
Over a 3-year period.
Of which $50,000 is out of pocket.
Correct.
Insurance company paid the rest.
Right. And if you were to get a recovery, I think that the insurance allows you, if it was less than the total, you would get your $50,000 back first, and then they would take whatever's left after that.
Okay, I think part of the reason of having Mr. Ellis here was just to give us an update, give our community an update on what this means, and then if there was direction from the board, I think some of that would need to be handled in executive session. Is that right? Or
you can, yes. This is an issue that under 610.021.1, which is legal matters, it's still an active lawsuit. It's not done quite yet. There's no appeal at this point that can be processed, but these issues are legal issues that tail onto that lawsuit and can be discussed.
Can we start the drug sniffing now, or do we need to wait till the loose ends are tied up before?
No. You have been found, the process that you used last time has been found to be constitutional under the United States Constitution. So if this board wants to have a resumption of that similar process, or one that is even enhanced because you always learn from your issues. I mean, one of the things we didn't anticipate out of that whole process but learned is it would be far better to have the whole thing videotaped. So there's no question about what happens. And we had cameras that videotaped the hallway encounters, but we didn't have anything in the classrooms. And it would have been better to have that, and it's a very simple fix. But if you all are interested in doing that, that is something that can be done.
We have board policy, I think, that addresses that. So if we wanted to deviate from board policy, we'd have to talk about it. Otherwise, that policy would stand.
I just think administration.
You have not only a board policy, and the board policies have been looked at and approved in essence by the Eighth Circuit, and you have a security guideline. I haven't got the right word, but a security guideline that was put together for the use of drug detection dogs, specifically for this, and it was a major part of what the Eighth Circuit looked at. The Eighth Circuit was, in essence, in its opinion, very complimentary of the kind of information that was shared with them during the appeal process, and the need, and felt that there was a genuine, legitimate public interest need to have the process.
Any other questions, Mr. Ellis?
Who were we in partnership with as far as this case?
The
Sheriff.
The operation, so that we're completely clear, the operation was solely, completely run by, directed by the school. It was a school operation. But we did not have drug detection dogs, so you have to go to some law enforcement agency that does. We partnered with Sheriff Arnott, who was his deputies did a wonderful job in that whole episode, and their work, and the sheriff was sued as well in this, just by being a partner in the thing. So.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you for representing us well.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Just before we move on, do any board members need a break? Okay. We did take action at our study session on the sale of the bonds, and we'll move on to action items for separate consideration. Dr. Ritter.
This evening we are to take action on the Board of Education 2013-2014 legislative priorities. And so Mr. Hosmer and Ms. Bush worked with me on these, and then we had a conversation, a discussion with the board. And so I have picked up that there might be some adjustments that either Mr. Hosmer or Ms. Bush may want to recommend, and we can make those adjustments and then go ahead and proceed.
It's just a language issue. I'm looking for it.
Tax credits.
Yes, thank you. It says thorough review of all tax credits. Actually, I think we need to support the report of the tax credit, the name of that group that Jim Anderson was on. The language was, there's already been a review of all tax credits at the state level.
That was what? Didn't we have that on our?
The language is just different. It really should be the language that was on last year's, because all we're doing is supporting the results of that the tax credit review committee.
And we can make that
Any objections there?
It's just putting the language in that was in
we'll put
last
that
year.
in.
Okay. Anything else need to be adjusted?
Well, this is comment. I like everything on here. This is maybe wordsmithing, but do we really need to put in there, but wants to be consulted by legislators before the bill's introduced? Don't we want to be consulted for all of it, not just that one? I mean, I understand the concept. I just kind of read funny, and that's the only one we talk about.
And that was my suggestion, and it came down to that House Bill 253 that was just sprung on us, and we spent all this time fighting against it when if some level-headed rep said, hey, what do you think about this bill, we could have said, it's a really disastrous bill. Maybe you shouldn't try to stuff it down our throats. So I just want to get something out there that while we support economic development like anybody else in the state, contact us beforehand if it's going to have any impact on funding or governance, and so that we're not in a position where we're fighting back against bad bills. We're a little more proactive. And I don't know that the language is all that great, but I just, that idea that maybe we can ask them to give us a call.
Is that something that could be an umbrella?
I
Is
agree.
that what you're saying?
I agree philosophically with what you're saying. I want them to call us on any of it that comes up. We need to be their first contact point for bills that are out there. That it was just individually rather than, but that's just a thought. I'm okay with it the way it is. I just
Soon leave it in there because I want to
Move for
use that.
acceptance of the legislative priorities with Mrs. Bush's change on tax cuts.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Been moved by Dr. Prater, seconded by Dr. Frederick, that the board approves the attached Springfield Public Schools 2013-14 legislative priorities for the 2014 legislative session. Is there any further discussion? We'll vote. Okay, moving on to 9.02, superintendent search firm. I just again want to thank all the board members for giving up an entire afternoon from your professional and personal commitments to really begin this process. And I think we had 3 good presentations, and there were questions about the value of using a search firm. And so I think having a discussion first and then a motion that we will, that we will use a search firm to assist us would be appropriate at this time. So,
I just moved to use a search firm in our endeavors to hire a new superintendent.
is there a second? It's been moved by Mrs. Bush, seconded by Dr. Prater, that the board does use a search firm to assist us in our hiring process. Is there discussion around that?
Do we have an idea that's going to be about a $70,000 outlay when we all is said and done?
I think that's pretty high. I have, I asked Mrs. Luton to pull last time, and of course this was 9 years ago, but we paid $22,500 plus expenses, which were approximately $7,500. So that was about a $30,000 commitment. I think the quotes for the base price this time was between $33,000 and $35,000 from the firms we heard from. So if you add a additional $15,000 for expenses, I heard a lot of them talk about technology has actually helped them, lower those expenses. We're probably talking about a total commitment of $50,000.
I mean, I guess in terms of discussion, I think it's a small price. I don't, quite frankly, I don't know that us putting it on the internet is going to get us fewer candidates than hiring a search firm. That's just my personal opinion. I could be completely wrong, but it is a headache, I think, to go through all the paperwork that's needed to advertise this and coordinate the application process. And again, it's a pretty small budget item. So I'm in favor of it, but don't know that there's much difference between the three, I guess.
Any other?
We would have to have a dedicated person to do nothing but this work for at least 3 months. There's a cost there, and then the ability for us to recruit would be very limited without a limited knowledge of who's out there. I just think it would be short-sighted and penny-wise and pound-foolish to try to do it on our own.
I think all 3 firms that we talked, that addressed us this afternoon, talked a lot about background checks and that type of complexity. I think that, to me, it's a small investment for assistance with a big decision. So. Okay, we'll have to voice vote on this because it's not on the agenda. So we'll start. Mr. Lee?
Aye.
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 Okay. Now, with that said, we'll enter into discussions about the actual firms. And just for the benefit of our audience, both here and
on our video. We did interview 3 firms this afternoon. Each had 45 minutes to, as part of their presentation, they gave a prepared statement or went through a PowerPoint, and then the board had the opportunity to ask questions. These firms had been selected or recommended by a subgroup of the board from the proposals that came to us as a result of an RFP that went out in September. And I think with that said, I think the best way to do this would be to have a general conversation, and then if there appears to be a consensus of the firm that people are, supportive, have that motion. So I think we're going to have that kind of discussion first. So, anybody like to start?
Sure.
Okay, Dr. Prater. Someone's got to be first.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
And can I just say this? We are using this discussion and the public record of it as documentation for our what am I trying to? We're not using scoring sheets. We're using this discussion and so as our criteria for professional selection. That's what
we use scoring sheets to bring the 3 finalists to the board, and found out that after we brought those scoring sheets, after we did that scoring, that the prices of the 3 we brought were within $1,500 of each other, so fairly close. I think I'm going to just speak to my favorite, and then we'll go from there. And my favorite is Ray and Associates, and I think for a couple of reasons. One thing was the diversity of their consultants and their candidates that they used. I think that this district needs to look at that. I think the flexibility in the way they allow us to structure the search was important. One of the firms came in with a very rigid way that they do it, which may work for us and may not. Ray, I think, was more appropriate in letting us configure things how we want to do it. I think him pointing out the speed to, if you have a top candidate, the need for speed sometimes is important in not letting that candidate get away. We've seen other entities in this town who maybe let somebody get away because they couldn't act quickly enough. Their search process was too rigid. I hope the video interview process saves us money on expenses. I know that was a question Mr. Hosmer had. And I like the candidate confidentiality issues. I asked all 3 firms the same question, or somebody asked one of the firms for me, but that candidate confidentiality, if we decide that's important to us, if the candidate doesn't want it to be known they're looking for this job until a certain point, Ray would honor that and would let us make the decision as to when we wanted to go public with our potential candidate list. And I think the number of searches they do, the final firm, and I asked Mr. McKenna to double check with ProAct, they are currently only doing 2 searches, not just that consultant, but the entire company is doing 2 searches. And I think we probably want somebody who is maybe currently doing more than just 2 searches. And those are all my notes.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else? Don't be shy. This is not a shy group.
Otherwise, I'll make a motion.
Yeah. Jared?
I thought we had 3 really good. Any one of them could do the job. I guess one of my concerns was what Dr. Prater talked about was the number with ProAct, which I personally, that was my top choice from the standpoint of what they did and who they worked with a lot through AASA, and both of them and Ray and Associates. I like the flexibility of us really having a lot of input into what the process is, as opposed to here's the process and here's how we do it, and you kind of ride along with it. So I really appreciated that. I guess one of the things that I really appreciated about the third one was, one, their clientele with respect to urban districts. They've done a lot with some large urban districts, which are a struggle, which I don't think we're in one of those struggle issues by any stretch of the imagination, but they certainly have had that good experience. But I did like the idea of looking at non-traditional sources for superintendents. Not necessarily always bringing, not that they would do that, but necessarily, but open to the fact of looking at non-traditional sources for superintendents to come in and do that. And but that's, like I said, they were all three pretty good. I guess I would have ranked that one first, and
well, just to make it more confusing, I join with Jerry on some of my thoughts on the PRO Act, but I must admit that I liked a lot of what the first folks said, McPherson and Jacobson, and one of the things I liked a lot was the fact that your final candidates interviewed with a lot of stakeholders, and those stakeholders told them what they thought about those candidates, and gave us the ability to take a look at that, not take a look at it, do what we wanted to do, but I did like that. I like the fact that, you know, I think gives us a kind of a broader sense of whether the folks we maybe saw something we liked, other key constituencies had issues. So I would have picked, I guess, the first McPherson or PRO Act would be my choices. But again, I think they were all would do a fine job for us.
Okay, Mr. Renner?
Since I was on the committee to look at the three, I think I spent a lot of time. I mean, some of those were, I think that first one was about 70 pages long. And to be able to, here's, I think, the point I want to make. If we as a board, when we decide on one of these firms, we can tell them what we want to do. So what they've done in the past may not fit what we want to do, and we're in control. And all three of them said that. You're in control as the board, so what you decide you want to do, we can advise you, but then you tell us what you want done. So, I mean, I'm glad all three presented because there were parts of all three of their things that I liked, so I could take from one and say, this, we're going to pick you, but we want this to be in our final, what we decide to do. The one thing I was able to do in reading those proposals is be able to look at we tout this as being as open as possible without violating anybody's rights. And I think some of the articles about the first company from places where they've done their searches, editorials and things in the paper have praised them for the openness of the search that they've done. And I think that's important, but I guess I would rank the first one, McPherson and Jacobson, first, but I would not be upset using Ray and Associates also. So I could do either one of those, I think.
I felt like the first presentation was the most organized and most specific. Maybe it was because it was fresh and it was just beginning. I'm not sure what. I was still awake. I felt the last one, I liked her presentation, I liked what she said, but it really wasn't a specific, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And it just kind of felt like maybe not, well, yeah, but I'd like to have heard more about how they did it, how she would do it. Also worried that it is a small operation, and that both of the other two said, we've got a big staff who are there, will answer the phone, they're going to be able to answer questions, and we can keep track of them. The last presenter said, well, we have all these consultants here and there, that people can call. Well, I think you need a single voice at one location that has the information and can answer it. I could go with either number 1 or number 2. I probably lean toward number 1 more just because of the specificity of the presentation, but I'm a specificity person, sorry. I like the fact, well, that number 2, Ray and Associates, has a 2-year guarantee. They were a little more specific about helping that transition for a longer period of time. Once they're here, I thought that was good. I like number one, McPherson's idea that the media can call them. We're open to answer questions, etc. So I would probably lean toward number 1. I could live with number 2.
All 3 were excellent presentations, and I liked all 3 for a little bit different reason, but my favorite was number 1, McPherson-Jacobson. I appreciated that throughout their process, in which they broke it up into 5 phases for us, phases of their search. And with each one, they continued to mention, or they continued to reiterate that it is our job as a board to hire the superintendent. It's their job to facilitate our process. And they continued to go back to, in each of their phases, how that would look, but what would drive their process would be what we tell them is our criteria and what is most important to us. And that was especially with phase 1 and 2, that what would continue to drive their work would be what we tell them is our need. They were very specific about how they go about collecting input from teachers and principals and communities and organizations and agencies, and even in fact allowing a 45-minute interview of each candidate by those particular focus groups of which we would identify. And I like that very openness, also including community meetings at a high school that would be posted where anyone would be welcome to come and talk to the finalists, the final candidates. So, and then they also mentioned in their phase 5 that they would help us with an evaluation template for the new superintendent as they come on that first year. So for those reasons, that would be my choice. But again, I liked aspects of the other 2 as well, but that's my choice.
Okay, I guess it's my turn. I was concerned about McPherson's presentation, that they've never placed anybody in Missouri. I think that that is a concern to me. And then they talked about being inclusive, but there was not inclusive language oftentimes in the presentation. And there was also, when we asked who the specific people would be helping us with our search, they were not able to identify who that was. And having gone through this before, that makes a big difference in who you are, who your contact person is. So those were some big red flags for me. And I also was confused. I think the process that we used in the past, that I think was a very, very helpful process. They talked, and I'm talking about McPherson, talked about first the board setting the criteria and then going to the community to ask them to respond to that once candidates had already been identified and finalists, semifinalists be identified. I think that that really is a concern, because I really think that that public input needs to come from the very beginning and needs to be independent from what is happening at the board level, because what Ray presented and what I know worked the last time we used, Ray, is that there was an identical assessment given to anybody who came to a focus group, a public forum, any type of meeting that way. And then they have since published it online. So they were the only ones I heard talk about an online assessment. And then they also talked about having that assessment available in 18 different languages, which I think is a very inclusive process. And then, so as I remember last time, and it doesn't sound like the process has changed, and it was a very effective process, is the board identified the characteristics from, at that point, 27 characteristics of what were key to us, and the community and everybody else took that very same assessment. So we were really comparing apples to apples and being able to really weave those together. So I think, to me, that was a real difference, and would make me not support hiring McPherson. And I'm concerned about PROAC. I think they tend to focus on districts that are maybe bigger than us, or certainly have different demographics. And just in doing some research on my own, found not just one search that the presenter talked about, the Atlanta search, but several others that have been pretty politically charged and problematic. And I think that that is something I don't really want to start, not that that would happen here, but having that history concerns me. So those would be my comments. So it sounds like we have some different perspectives here, and a further discussion might be helpful.
Yeah, let me clear up a question then, because I understood McPherson and Jacobson to say very emphatically they would not take a candidate who didn't check the little box on the form that said, I waive confidentiality on this, on my application. And if that even has the potential to limit a candidate who might apply, who might have been our top candidate.
Waive confidentiality if they were a finalist.
No.
No.
Throughout the whole process.
No, that's what he said. He said finalist. They specifically said finalist.
Even that, still. I think that if that were to limit us, I don't want to be put in that box at the beginning. So what if our best candidate came through and we looked on paper and we're all very impressed with him, and he said, because of my current job situation or family situation or whatever, would we want to give up that candidate? That was my major issue with that company, is we're not in control of that.
And I guess kind of like that too, the biggest thing of PROACT and Ray was the fact, or at least I felt like maybe I heard it wrong, was McPherson tended to, we put together the criteria, then we went out to the public before we established the criteria. And I think we need to establish the criteria and what we're looking for with input to that, and then we establish what that's going to be from all the focus groups. And I got the impression that was we figure what it's going to be, then we go out and we talk to the focus groups and the community groups, and then if it doesn't agree, then we need to figure out what do we go. It just seemed a little. You didn't have all the information before we did the criteria. Now I think I don't want to disagree. I think they had a process where you did it up front with the community, but it was still, we come up with it and then we go to the focus groups and then you go back with the candidates. They're not happening simultaneously. It was done first and then that was step 2. I mean, I don't know if that's a deal breaker from that standpoint, but I know that was, it just seemed like that some more of the community feedback needed to be up front, a little closer up front as we put that criteria or priorities that we're looking for.
Well, but I guess Tom heard the thing about the confidentiality, and I kind of heard from Ray and Associate the opposite, that there's going to be pushing, let's keep it all confidential, let's do bullet point, and we'll get you somebody and you hire them. it seemed like there was kind of a sense of, if you all keep it under wraps, you get better candidates. And
I think he said we get to make the decision.
well, I understand, but he also talked about the fact that that there may be very advantages of doing that. I got a sense from them, from their presentation, that they've moved that way, and I got a sense from the other firm that they've kind of moved toward a much more open and transparent, which, quite frankly, I'd much prefer this process to be. I didn't get the sense also that there was we do it and then go out after we get the candidates, go out to the community. I think they're in their brochure that we look through. Phase 2 talks about talking to stakeholder groups and then doing the vacancy announcements. So I agree. I mean, quite frankly, we're going to ask for a visionary that's good within the community, that has good achievement, and our community is going to ask for a visionary that's good in the community, that's good in achievement. I mean, we all kind of know what makes a good superintendent. So the fact that we're going to go out to the community and get a different idea, maybe, but probably we're going to get the same thing that we all talk about every day up here, which is somebody that is out in the community, is well respected, can advocate for public education, and can raise test scores. So again, I feel more comfortable with the first firm. But
I can just tell you what happened last time in terms of how that all came to be. We received, I think it was about 12 or 14, right? Bruce, do you remember when we met at University Plaza? And we had all the applications there, but there had been some vetting and kind of, we feel like these are, the best, the ones that fit your criteria. And then the board had a full discussion on that, and from those 12 and from the other applications that we were able to view that night, we narrowed it down to 6. And still and those names were still private. And those people came in, and in the end it was only 5 that came in because one missed his plane and he decided not to reschedule. But those came in for a semifinalist interview, and that was, I mean, if somebody wanted to find out who those were, they could have, but there was, kind of an agreement that it was, a confidential process. And then from there, we chose 2 candidates to interview finally. And of those 2, we decided that there was clearly one clear candidate, and that's when we brought in Dr. Ritter for his final interview and working with the community. He wasn't hired at that point. There was no contract written. It was an open interview with a lot of different stakeholders going around to different schools. And so, again, I think there was a lot of pressure then because Missouri State and Drury were all hiring at the same time, and they were kind of doing they had committed to doing a very set, we're going to bring in 3 people at the end, and, and I think what happened, and what I heard in Ray's presentation today is don't commit to a certain process at the very beginning because you don't know what the end is going to be like. I mean, I think we can commit to being transparent, getting feedback in the very beginning, and I think from my perspective, having gone through this one other time, front-loading that public input really helps you bring those right people in the end, and then having that final, check with the community. So I think it's always a balance between openness and privacy. I mean, I think there's always that balance. So,
can I say one more thing? One, and I got the impression from all 3 firms that we can guide much of this. One concern I did have with Ray and Associates was I think we got an answer, a pretty clear answer, in terms of whether they recruit their placed superintendents. And the answer was no from 2 of the firms, a pretty firm no, at least for the first 3 years. But I'm not sure we got a firm no from Ray and Associates. And so that kind of concerns me. We get someone in place that's successful, doing a good job, and in a couple of years they start getting recruited by Ray and Associates. I mean, that was just one of the concerns I had about the discussion. So
They said 4 to 5 years.
they did. They
By the
did.
way, is Norm still under warranty? We get a free search if.
Well, and I guess that's a point I would make. I mean,
But the other two
I just thought it
said
was a
never.
little wishy-washy.
They would never
well,
recruit.
they said never, but then if you know that the searches they've been involved in, you know that one of those candidates went from one of those districts to another. So at some point, I'm not sure that that was exactly right.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And that's the Kansas City to Detroit. Or Detroit to Kansas, whatever that. So
They did both those.
they advertised that they did.
Well, I think we have to make our decision based on what we found out today from the presentations. And if there's other stories out there and we need to do additional research to collect that, maybe we need to postpone our decision. But I think we have to go on from what we heard today and the response to our RFP. So
I think one of the things, and I don't think it's just a justification as far as the two, we're pretty early in the process of superintendent hiring right now. This is early, typically. Not really early, but it's a couple of months early, but still only 2 is not very many for a significant firm. But, which I think is a good thing to be early. I think this is a good thing based on what I heard from other people. There may be a lot more. There may be a lot more out there that's going to be open here soon. Based on what's happening in Missouri, that's a good chance.
In Kansas.
Well,
Kansas.
are there other points that came out in, I mean, it sounds, I've done a little quick dirty tally. It sounds like between, it's McPherson and Jacobson and Ray are the ones that people are leaning towards the most. So are there?
Well, you want me to go ahead and make a motion?
I
ready?
mean, are people ready? Are there other discussions to have? I mean, people can make a motion whenever they want, but
I'd make a motion to board contract with McPherson and Jacobson as a search firm.
for a second.
I'll second it.
Been moved by Mr. Hosmer, second by Mrs. Bush, that the board contract with McPherson and Jacobson for the, what is their amount of money? I didn't see. I don't have that in front of me. Wait, there's going to be further discussion. Don't vote yet. I think just make sure that.
Now I can pull up the dollar amount.
Yeah. How much? 35,260 plus expenses. I guess again, I'm just really concerned that we would get that, how that, I guess we could shape it, but making sure that public input comes very, very early in the process than later in the process. I'm concerned about that.
My understanding was it was.
Yeah.
So I heard.
You have it?
On page 30, look on page 33 of the book, and it says, at the time designated by the board, stakeholder group community meetings are held. At a time designated by the board. So
Okay.
I think we're in control of that. That's how I read that statement right there.
Yeah, okay.
No, that's right.
Any more discussion?
Went away.
Is it going to pop up?
Yeah. 552? Yep, 52. Right. So, Mr. McKenna, will you contact them? And then, I guess at this point at least, I'd be the contact person, although I think we need to discuss that. I'd be very willing to delegate that to another person, but we can talk about that. So, okay, great. Moving on to 9.03, approval of transportation routes. Mr. Wendt? Oh, Mr. Emmer.
Members of the board, Dr. Ritter.
Just don't put on the brakes, okay?
It's my
Just
hope
let it
that
go.
this is a much easier decision for you all to make. Missouri law requires that the Board of Education approve school bus routes every year before the end of October. We currently use 128 route buses. We transport an average of 7,800 students every day. Buses travel approximately 9,600 miles per day on the routes. A couple items of note. Since I've been here, this is my fourth school year, we've been able to not increase the number of routes, even though our ridership is continuing to go up. That's a credit to the technology that we were able to purchase several years ago, and sort of the training with the staff behind that, and some of the work we do to embrace the technology and use it to its fullest ability. A couple other things, on top of all this, we also do about 2,600 field trips a year, and I will make a statement that today is one of those crazy days where we did 75 field trips today.
Wow.
So a lot going on today. Symphony was a big deal today.
Oh, that's what it was.
We did a lot of buses at the Symphony. So with that, it's our recommendation that you approve the routes. I'll entertain any questions you might have.
Is there any questions? Thank you to you and your staff for doing the great work.
I move that we approve the bus routes as developed by the Transportation Department.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Mrs. Bush, seconded by Mr. Lee, that the Board of Education approves the bus routes as developed by Transportation Department. Mr. Chodes?
Treasurer's report. If you'd please open up the attachment and turn to the September 2013 financial statement for operating funds. I'd like to first direct your attention to the fact that our total revenue is actually somewhat behind last year at this time. However, there's no indication that will remain so throughout the year. Looking at a few of the revenue line items, property taxes is about a third below what it was at this time last year. However, as you can see, we've only collected about 1.4% of the total budget, so nothing to be overly concerned with yet at this time. And in fact, we have received the information for the October property taxes, and we're about 80,000 higher than we were in October of last year. Sales tax, which is more evenly distributed throughout the year, is higher than it was last year. We're at 27% this year versus 24.7%, which is a good thing. Also, on the total county revenue, the county stock insurance was received this month, or in September, as it was last year, and you can see we gained about $55,000 over last year. And the total federal revenue, which is the big difference between this year and last year, that's strictly a timing difference, and we should be receiving that money next month. Looking at the total expenditures, we are tracking below where we were last year at this time, which is once again a good thing. The total employee costs, salaries, and benefits is lower than it was last year at this time, and since it's such a significant part of our total expenditure budget, anything that's even a small amount lower than it was last year is a good thing. Capital outlay, that's one of the larger differences. It was at 40% last year. We're at only 26% this year. The major expenditure item in capital outlay is the major repairs, and Mr. Bishop and his group are pretty good about spending all their budget. So I imagine at the end of the year we'll be pretty close to budget on that. The next page is the list of budget variances. The big item, the $34,000, was the Title I-C grant, which we received this year. So we added it to revenues, and we also added it to expenditures as well. And at this time, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Are there any questions of Mr. Chodes? Is there a motion?
Move to approve the treasurer's report as submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved by Dr. Prater, seconded by Mr. Renner, that the board approves the treasurer's report as presented.
Thank you.
Okay. Entertain a motion to approve the routine action items.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Hosmer, seconded by Dr. Prater, that the board approves each of the routine action items as submitted. Is there a motion to approve the general consent items? Just a minute, sorry.
I'll make that motion as well.
Okay, Mr. Hosmer, is there a second? Been moved by Mr. Hosmer, seconded by Dr. Prater, that the board approves each of the general consent. Sorry, that didn't come up on mine. The general consent items. See a listing of the information items that were discussed at the study session. Mrs. Luton, are there any public comments? Comments from the board. Legislative report. Is there anything going on there? Pretty much covered that under legislative. Future issues. I do have, this would be other, never mind. I do have one thing that I would like to bring up, and we don't need to discuss it tonight, but I am concerned that when we postponed the facilities review, that I'm concerned that we not stall those kinds of discussions internally, or the work that our staff is doing to kind of review what our needs are. And I was wondering if there would be support from the rest of the board to have a discussion of how that more global discussion might look. Whether it's the administration coming to us with the top 15 capital projects, and then we put some parameters around that of how to start getting some community input on that. I don't really have an idea of what that would look like, but I just don't want to stall those discussions. I think there was, as we were deciding that issue, people would say, well, we know what the needs are and we know what the priorities are, but I'm not sure we really collectively know what they are. And so would there be support from the rest of the board to move forward with some just general discussion?
I think we have to.
Yeah, we had that conversation in cabinet as well. We think
Okay.
we need to do it as well. We support that, yeah.
All right, so would, Dr. Ritter, would you work with your team to kind of start to talk about what that might look like in coming
Sure.
to the board?
Sure. We'll do.
Are there pieces of that the board would like to see first before we would talk about a process? Or
It's been several months ago, but I took a concern forward to cabinet that I'd received from several parents at one of our middle schools, and in fact they had some extensive pictures and some concerns related to the needs in that building. And I think that at that time that cabinet had a short priority list, and I think it was titled Next Bond Issue, and this particular school and several others were listed on that. So I think you already have a start or a beginning to that list, and if you could continue to work on that or work toward that, I think that would be helpful.
I think there's another dimension that we don't have in there, and that's technology. Technology is going to impact what facilities look like, and so we're going to have to keep that in mind as well, because as we broaden our bandwidth, we're starting to feel some need to look at the hardware. Now, that's not part of a bond, but still, it's going to be a facility, as we talked about with the new tech and stuff. So we'll keep that in mind too. So.
Anything else under future?
One thing on that is we keep hearing feedback from parents and from staff about crowding, and as we have new schools and new classrooms coming online, I think the board want to keep apprised of how that's being.
Sure.
Mr. Renner, you were waiting.
I'd like for the board at the next board meeting or as soon as possible to talk about in this school year not adding additional staff, new jobs. I think there's some things we need to evaluate on what we're doing now, and I'm concerned about that, but I'd like the board to discuss it. And
would you think that would be under like a strategic discussion, information item?
Sure. Anything. Your report, anything there.
Are there would there be support for that?
I guess I'm confused. You want more staff or you don't want more staff, or?
I don't want new staff added.
In the middle of the year?
Yeah. Between now and the end of the year. New jobs.
Okay. Have you, okay. Is there other interest in that?
Are you talking about over and above what's budgeted?
Does that happen? You have
No,
positions
why don't we have a report on that, Norm?
Sure.
Okay.
We did have, sure.
I'm going to get to something. I think the other thing that we need to talk about, and probably tonight is not it after a long afternoon and a long meeting, but we need to have some input from board members about what they would like to see as part of our strategic discussions and moving forward during the year, and actually have it be, really dedicate some time to look at those issues and have a more have a discussion, not a presentation about some of those issues that are concerning. I know Mrs. Bush has brought some forward. I think that there are some others out there. So if you can come prepared next month with those ideas
At the study session.
Bring those, and we will start to put together a calendar of what that strategic discussion will look like.
But we won't do any at the next meeting, you think?
There's something, and I don't have it on my radar screen right now of what it is, but there is something planned for strategic discussion, right, Dr. Ritter?
I'm sorry?
Strategic discussion in November?
Right.
Okay,
That's
that
what
we're
our
going to
plan-
talk about.
list.
We're going to talk about how to
We're gonna
structure that.
brainstorm.
Yeah.
But we can't talk about a strategic item. Okay.
What is your point?
Oh, we're going to talk about what the topics we're going to do, but I wanted to talk about a topic. So,
Well, what topic do you want to talk about?
I want to know what's happening in early childhood.
You wanted to report back on our
what's
involvement with
happening
the
with
Every
every
Child
child and-
initiative.
Sure,
what
we
are
can do
we
that.
I think that's
We can do that
fine.
under information. We can do that under information. Sure.
Well, no, I think, yeah. Do you want to have do you want to have that as part of the
I
strategic
think that will
discussion,
be
or
a
do you want to?
strategic discussion later. I guess I would, under information, I would like to, what
Just
are we
what
doing?
are we doing now?
I think it will generate into a strategic discussion
That's
at a
fine.
later date.
How
I
many
see.
on the board are part of
I
those
misunderstood
subcommittees? No?
I don't think that's,
Anybody else part of those subcommittees? Okay.
or do what?
He's on the mayor's commission, though.
In the
It's on a
every
subcommittee.
child.
Okay, you're on a subcommittee. So prepared with what district personnel is involved, and have board members ready to share what they're doing, and what else do you want
Well,
included?
I just want to bring us up to date on what the school system is doing, what Missy's doing here, and her work, because before the Every Child came about, there's an early care group with Kimberly Shin Brown and some other people that have been talking about how do we roll out standards, how does that look? So I want a broader discussion beyond every child about the people in the trenches and the work that they've already done, because they've gone a long way towards saying, here's what this might look like.
Okay, in asking,
The committees are going to be ready.
No.
can you just give us an update of what you're
Yeah,
doing?
we can tell you we've been meeting.
But
we have OSRs on early childhood. So I don't know.
I agree with what you're talking about. I'm not sure the timing's going to be right with every child yet.
Yeah.
To get some of the recommendations out and all that,
I know what-
because it's going to impact us.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, okay. But Missy, Kimberly, Shem Brown with Head Start have for 3 or 4 years already been in the trenches doing things and saying, this is where we are. Seems like we ought to know that information. That's all I'm saying.
Do you think that
And it's more than
asking
an
them
OSR.
to bring that to us in 3 weeks is
Sure.
giving them
Oh,
enough?
they'll be fine.
I think she can do that.
Okay.
Because she's already has a packet ready. So.
Okay, and then be prepared at that day to talk about other things that you want involved in that discussion. Yeah, Andy?
I don't know if this is a future issue or a strategic discussion, but at MSBA, I went to a couple of kind of related seminars that were fascinating and both kind of around Common Core. And I got the PowerPoints from both of them, but one of the second one was how important it is to have a action plan as a district in place to get the information out about Common Core. You know, the idea that Missouri will drop 20 points immediately with the first reading out of the numbers with Common Core. Getting your community prepared for those numbers, I think, is a big task. So I think we need to have a regular discussion so the board members, I went into that discussion learning a lot about Common Core, and I somewhat follow it, but
So are you asking for an update to the board on that?
I guess maybe I can share those with Marty, and you can kind of maybe put something together, because I'd like for us to start being able to share that out to the community, and maybe what I'd like for us to do also is to hook up with the news leader, and maybe get the news leader to do a series of stories so that we can really broadcast why this is important, but what it's going to look like and what growing pains we're going to have, because we're going to have them, it seems.
Marty did an excellent presentation to the Downtown Rotary Club last week. If we can get her out, and I think it opened a whole lot of eyes within that meeting.
I think one of the pieces of feedback I got was that it's kind of a turnkey presentation that could be modified in talking points that any of you could, and kind of that strategic messaging piece. Not to put you on the spot, but there's some literature and some just quick talking points of that very low key, keep it cool, keep it calm. So
I like the video from the National Chamber of Commerce in support.
Yes, with respect to that, I think one of the things that we could do there, and I know MSBA is trying to do this, is to arm board members with a bunch of this fact or fiction of all the misinformation that's out there. Yeah. And it's just here, you know, the Mythbuster type concept of what we hear about Common Core and what the facts really are. And the best thing we can have is ammunition, because we get it every day out there going, you know, what the heck is this Common Core doing? You know.
So maybe five key points that we
And I'm
could
just
have
saying,
a little.
I know that some of that's being generated already. We may not have to reinvent the wheel on some of this, but to Ms. Hosmer's point, I think we as a board need to be prepared to be proactive on this as opposed to waiting till we get. And I don't know I don't have an answer to the process, but I think the concept is a very good concept with the Common Core, because it's going to be a difficult thing as we move forward to 2015 over the next 18 months.
I'm on still a future issue, and it could be other, but I had the pleasure of attending the Mercy Health Academy. Dr. Hackenworth, am I correct? Is that what it's going to be called? Is that the name? Their planning meeting at Mercy Hospital last week. I had a chance to see the architectural design, their classroom layout. They're making significant progress toward and on track for having students there in 2014, 2015. And I was very impressed with the partnership piece there, because as a topic would come up, and there was some discussion about, okay, who will be in charge, be responsible for this. Mercy staff stepped up almost every time and said, we'll take care of that. We'll make sure that's happening. We'll, have your food service get with our dietitian. We'll help plan that. So I was very impressed with the high level of partnership there for Mercy, and it's very exciting, and I'm hoping that we'll have an update. Again, Dr. Ackenworth, you'll step in here if you need to in December, because it is phenomenal, the progress they're making and where that's headed.
Just about that time.
So, and I think you're going to maybe post positions or thinking of.
Yes, it'll be prior to the end of the year, possibly by that time.
Okay, moving on to other, Mrs. Luton has asked me to remind people that the registration for the National School Board Association meeting in New Orleans, which is April 5th through the 7th, opens next week, and she would like to know who would like to attend. We traditionally have enough money budgeted for whatever board member would like to go. And I think for us as a district our size, oftentimes many of us feel like we get really good value from this and we're also presenting our innovation and choice programs. So please let her know if you'd like to go. She does a good job of getting us registered, and what that does is get you a hotel room close. It's after.
Yeah, so we don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's after that.
This year it was, the election was before.
Yeah, it always varies depending on where the venue is. So, you received. I'm going to move us through here. Anything else under other? Okay, you received the financial and operations report under separate cover. Please do your plus deltas. Again, thank you so much for the extra time you devoted today. And we do have executive session to, I believe it's just real estate, right?
Right. We don't do anything with the financial operations report for September.
No, that's just, you just read it. I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss real estate issues.
I'll make that motion as well.
Okay, Andy,
I'd be
you're on a
willing
roll.
to do it.
Is there a second? Been moved by Mr. Hosmer, seconded by Mrs. Bush, that the board will meet in executive session following this meeting to discuss real estate matters as provided in section 610-021, sections 1 and, well, what is real estate 2? Sections 2. Section 2. Good job.
The Cardinals game is about an hour over, isn't it?
See what it is. Tell you what's happening.
Cardinals need to win today.
Did you get a strange message?
Boston just scored.
Who scored?
Yeah, 1-0.
Also got a hit.
All I have to say is, where are the Rockets?
Yeah.